Beautiful, isn't it? The game passing before your eyes right now is Flying Turtle Software's A Walk in the Dark, a game that many have called out for looking a lot like Limbo, and fair enough, there is a silhouette art style going on here. However, after having played through the game, I can tell you that the game is more like Super Meat Boy and at times Terry Cavana's VVVVVV. But let's not get caught up on comparisons here. A Walk in the Dark can certainly stand on its own 2 feet. Other than looking beautiful and sounding beautiful, that soundtrack from Cody Cook really is marvellous, seriously. The game does have a lot of variation through its levels. In total there are 100, and across there are 3 different types of level. One is a gravity inverting one with a young girl, and the other 2 involve you playing as a cat. You have the normal kind of side-scrolling 2D platformer we all know and love. It's typical kind of platforming gameplay really, but it's really elegant. The team at Flying Turtle have managed to capture the feeling of being a cat quite well, which for the cat-obsessed internet people you are, well, that's probably the kind of thing that appeals to you. I know it does to me. Then you have the other level which you play as a cat, in which you must simply press A and B to duck and dodge different hazards from the floor and ceiling, basically flipping between the 2. So kind of like VVVVV crossed with Cannabolt in a way, I guess you could say. But again, I don't want to get caught up in comparing the game to other games, basically. The game is basically a journey from a forest through a cave and to a machine with lots of cogs and things turning in the background. The preview version I've played didn't actually have any of the story in it, the cinematics which will be in the final version, but I did get a sense of progression through the levels and the gameplay. The main objective of the game is to simply get through the levels, but there are a number of shiny things to collect on the way, which is good for people like me who get distracted by such things. And for those other nutters who love speed running and that kind of thing, there are some level-based achievements tied to getting through the levels in the first time or under a certain par time. Now, rather than simply listen to me talk about the game, I do have Paulo Silva from Flying Turtle Software who's going to talk about the game in more detail. So, one thing I want to talk about first is, obviously I had the gameplay preview. I'm guessing that a lot of the story was missing from the game.
Yeah, we as I said when I sent it, we still just have a temporary screen right now.
Yeah.
We know what we want to do for the story. We want to do some kind of cinematics, small things between the levels, especially the transition between the modes, the play modes, and of course the beginning and the end.
Yeah. What is the kind of story to the game? Like, if you had to sum it up for someone who didn't have a clue.
Well, it's really a journey. Well, it's really a classic story of rescue, kind of like a princess. In the beginning, we wanted to incorporate all into the gameplay, so that there were no need for cinematics. Only that proved really hard to do, and we really didn't have the means and the people. I know that on our website it looks like we are a lot of people, but really there are 1 or 2 people working in the game at all times. So there were some parts of story that were meant to be in gameplay, that we have no boss battles, as you probably noticed. That was one of the things that we had intended to do.
Yeah. In your trailer for the game, there was that creature, the dark kind of creature, I'm not even sure what it was. I think it was made of bone or something. Was that kind of one of your ideas for the bosses originally?
Yeah, definitely that was the big boss. We still want to keep him, of course. He is a major character in the game, but we had to restrain ourselves to the cinematics in this case.
That's fair enough. I mean, we can't always get what we want, I guess, but I mean, the gameplay's worked out fine from what I played anyway, so it's not all bad.
Yeah. We try to, since we come to that, we try to keep the gameplay, evolve the gameplay in other ways. We opted for the mixed approach when you play the various play modes.
Yeah, and it's worked. Like I said, like I felt the sense of progression, like not just in the game's difficulty, which was really good actually. While we're on the topic, I went back and played some of the previous, like the early levels after completing the game, and I just saw that this huge difference between how I was playing back then to how I was playing by the end, and especially the speed running one, as you call it. When I went back to the first levels of that, I was so much better than when I was the first time. Like, it was a huge difference, because the last levels of that are an absolute pain in the ass. But that's a good thing. In a good
Yes,
way.
they are. we knew we wanted to do the game hard, not so hard probably as Super Meat Boy or as the Impossible game, but yet hard, so that people get that progression. So we try to keep the controls simple and as good as we could do it.
There was a lot, I'd say, like, in the control scheme of things, there was a lot of similarities, mostly to Super Meat Boy, because you could hold in the A button. I was using the controller, obviously. Holding the A button to do a higher jump. You could wall jump. The only thing that wasn't there was the sprint mechanic, as in there is in Super Meat Boy. And a lot of the level design, especially near the end, like, it definitely reminds me of Super Meat Boy.
Oh, definitely, Super Meat Boy is a major influence in our game, in our gameplay, especially, even in the level design, because the Super Meat Boy level designs, they have some of the best levels that are playing in a platform.
That's fair enough. Moving on to something else other than the controls. Well, sort of. I know you guys spent quite a lot of time trying to make the cat feel like a cat. So I'm guessing that you watched a lot of cats over your time.
Yeah, I watch a lot.
How did you go about doing that? How did you make the cat feel like a cat? Because I do agree, I think the cat does feel like a cat when you're playing as the cat, at least.
Well, thanks. Really, thanks. I'm glad to hear that. We had to redo the animation of a cat. I don't know how many times, about 5 times, and we have a huge collection of sprites for it. To the cat feel so fluid, we really needed a lot of sprites, a lot of sync, and the controls to feel really tight. You really need to feel in control to feel like that fluid, that responsive.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you need to watch a lot of cats as well.
Of course, internet and cats.
Obviously, the game is set in a dark world, and you've illustrated that with the game's art and as well as the music by Cody Cook, which is amazing, by the way. I think I've said this before.
Yeah, you did a really great job.
Yeah. What is the art style? What were you trying to go for with that?
As we intended this to be a dark story, kind of like an Alan Poe kind of thing. We went for that film noir look. Of course, meanwhile Limbo was released and we got some mixed feedback because it kind of looks like Limbo. Hopefully, it won't be too bad because I think it doesn't feel like Limbo when playing. Only when you see only the screenshots. We weren't trying to copy Limbo. That is probably a major critic that we get. That was never our intention. We were looking for that dark look, that dark story look from the film noir movies. Since we choose that look, we had some trouble because when you go for that black silhouette look, you can't give detail to the objects. So all the silhouettes have to be very clear and very different from another, or it's very hard to you to play and to know what you are looking at. So we had to redo some of our enemies too, so that they will be so distinctive and will feel and you look at them and know what you are facing.
Yeah, I do like the art style actually, especially the backgrounds. The work you put in the backgrounds are really nice. The other thing I was gonna talk about was you're leading up to the launch of the game slowly. You've completed most of the gameplay, I think you said to me. You're just working on a few other things. And you're going to submit the game to Steam Greenlight?
Yeah, we are looking into it. Not sure. I think it's close to launching. We are trying to get it there. I'm not sure how it will work, but hopefully will be a really good platform for launching indie games.
Presumably the game is on schedule to release this year, presumably?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have all the levels. We are just need to tweak some things there and do the cinematic story and stuff. And hopefully it will be over soon. And
then you're good to go.
Yeah.
Tell everyone how good your game is. I think I will be anyway, because I really enjoyed it, and I love platformers anyway, so... And I thought this one was really interesting. Not just because of the art style and the music, but you're having 3 different kinds of gameplay, all platformers still, but having it in there, I think helped. Like I said, I completed all 100 levels quite quickly, but it didn't feel like I was completing 100 levels. It felt really easy and smooth just to go through the whole game. Normally when you play a game, you get to a point and think, oh, I'm fed up with this now, but I never had that, so... Apart from when I rage quit a couple of times, but apart from that...
Yeah, we have that moment.
There's going to be a few people getting a bit angry with this game, I'd imagine. But that's, with a platformer, that's a good thing, anyway. And you've done the good thing by having a really relaxing art style and music to try and help people who get angry.
Yeah, to deal with the pain.
Exactly, yeah. This game hurts me so much, but this piano is so nice. And on that note, I guess we'll leave it there. So thanks for watching, folks, and I'll catch you next time.